Hey friends, today I'm going to be going over how to create an ombre paint on a dresser that is beautiful. It has good bones, it has awesome character, but it's just a little drab and a little outdated. So I'm going to show you how you can use what you might already have in your garage, in your storage shed, to just spruce it up and give it kind of new life. So my biggest thing is that I feel like when you're upcycling something, it shouldn't have to cost a lot of money. There are all kinds of fun tricks and shortcuts, and so my video, I really want to show you some of those, I would say, hacks that you can use to help get the look you want without spending like $200 or $300 on chalk paint and glazes and really fancy tools. So I'm going to go through some of the materials we need, and then I'm going to show you how simple it is to get that ombre look. You can use chalk paint. I would suggest, if you want to have easier blending, that you might use some chalk paint. What happens with that is it's easier to sand down and to stress, but with the pieces of furniture that I made using this technique, I used paint that I already also had in the house. I used 1 can of chalk paint for that kind of, it was a medium gray. It is so mangled now. This is, I got it for $15 at the hardware store, and it's just very basic gray chalk paint. So I use that and I mix it into my latex paints that I already have around the house. I've done everything possible in my house. So I have little jars of paint that I use to touch up those things around the house, so I have tons of paint. So if you have latex touch-up paint from your home projects, from your walls, there is no reason that you can't go ahead and use that. Okay, so I want to show you that you can create something really beautiful without spending a lot of money. Because what's the point? Let's say you got this for, you know, 20 or 30 bucks, let's just pretend. And then if you have to spend $200 fixing it up, you didn't really do anything great because you still spent, you know, $250 on it. So I want to show you that you can do this, and I want to open your eyes to what you already might have in your house and that you can use. All right, so I'm going to see if I can pan down here. I have all of my little products, little jars, okay? I do have my 1 jar of chalk paint, all right? It's just kind of a medium gray, but I have tons of house paint. This is kind of a grayish green. I have a little jar of white chalk paint that one of my good friends just gave me. She was very sweet, so I have used that. I have white from my house project, a dark gray from my house project, a brown, and I also had this laying around. It's called polyacrylic. For this project, you will need to go ahead and utilize either a polyacrylic for kind of that sealer at the end, because you don't want your product to not last, right? Especially on the vertical surfaces. Somebody might set a glass down or something. I stick with the acrylics because I don't like the smell of oil-based, and I always am working in the house, around people, around my kids, so I tend to stay with that. I picked this up the other day. It's just Minwax. It's a wood stain with a clear tint base. So why did I choose this? Again, water-based, okay? So it's easy to clean, it doesn't have a strong odor, and it doesn't take a long time to dry. I live in an area that's very humid, so anything that you do with oil-based products takes ages to dry. I don't have time or patience for that. So I got this wood stain. It is water-based, and now here's the fun thing. You can use this to make your own custom glazes, okay? So this is clear. I have a little mixing bowl, and when we get to that part of the project, I'm going to show you how you can mix a little bit of just a regular paint, let's say a black paint, a latex. You can put it into that clear tint and make kind of a, I would say, like a muddy kind of distressing glaze on it. And so we're gonna apply it and then we're gonna wipe it off and it'll get caught in all those grooves. That's what gives you that aged look. All right, so other tools that I have. I got this bad boy on Amazon. It's a chalk paint brush, all right? It was probably $12, you know, nothing crazy. It serves its purpose. It had good reviews. I have my watercolor brushes because I am color in the water. That's what I do as my main, you know, source of income. I'm a watercolor artist, but I do this on the side because it's just a heck of a lot of fun. But I use these to get my patina accents into these tiny little grooves. So I have those. I have another brush, just kind of a flat angled brush. And I use something like this for those vertical surfaces because I'm gonna wanna get that weathered, kind of a barnwood type look, okay? So these are the things I'm working with. I have a little bit of blue here and I have my primary colors. These are just acrylic paints. So this is going to help me mix the other colors for those accents. I have paper towels, baby wipes, and I have a sock. Those are my products. Now the next part, we're gonna go ahead and get into the painting portion. All right, hey everybody, we're gonna start our painting portion of our section. So we're gonna go ahead and start with a light gray. All right, kind of show you what that looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the middle area. Then I'm going to blend in a dark gray. Now let me tell you, this is just leftover latex paint, all right? Doesn't all have to be chalk paint. That's like $300 an ounce. So we're gonna go ahead and start getting that in the grooves in here, all right? So with chalk paint, it is wonderful in that it's easy to spread, all right? So I'm gonna see if I can get an angle where people can kind of see what's going on here. And my decision for my hardware is I like going ahead and painting over the hardware. Let's get all that chalk paint in there. I do not remove my hardware. I distress around it later. So that's kind of what gives it a little bit of spunk, all right? So one thing to realize with chalk paint is that it spreads really easy if you have a little bit of water. I just have a spray bottle with water in it. Get it in those grooves. And that's okay if it's not completely in all the grooves because we want to show the details of the wood. That's, you know, that's one of the beautiful aspects of getting a piece of furniture like this. All right. Now as we come down, we're going to go ahead and cover all the surfaces of this side. And now for the purpose of the video, I'm going to focus on one side at a time, but the idea is the same. You know, obviously on the other side it will be similar. I really want to show you guys how easy it is to get those colors blended together. Now you notice, now with an ombre, you have a very light, you have a medium, and you have a dark. So I'm stretching my gray all the way up. Okay, that's gonna help me with coverage. And then at the top, I'm gonna come in with a little bit of white and blend it down. So if you notice your brush kind of moving slowly, just get a little water up in there and have it help you out. The brush that I have here that I got on Amazon is it's got thick bristles that get down into those curves. So as you can see, we're getting kind of covering some of that brown. I'm gonna go ahead and draw my gray a little bit down to where I will have my darker colors, all right? Again, it's gonna help with the blending. When I start to pop in those other colors, I'm gonna have something to mix it into, all right? So I'm gonna keep drawing this downwards. Now I choose to go ahead and paint over my hardware because I also come back later and I use those turquoise accents to kind of give it a very aged look, like it's been sitting out for, you know, 30 years in the elements. All right, so now kind of go back up and make sure that you've caught all of your drips. There'll be little areas that the paint gathered kind of thickly in that particular area. And so you want to go back in there. Just make sure that there's nothing dripping down. And don't worry too much about brush strokes right now. We're looking for coverage, all right? So now we're going to go down lower and we're going to start mixing in a little bit of darker gray, my latex paint, all right? So kind of show you what it looks like. I'm just going to tap in there. And now latex paint is thick, all right? It's a little bit harder to spread than chalk paint. So you're going to want to go ahead and make sure you have your spray bottle handy. All right, give it a good spray, and then you can start popping that gray in there. And you see how it mixes really well with the existing gray. And now I'm going to take that gray and I'm going to blend it upwards a little bit. Again, make sure you have water on that brush. So as I'm coming upwards, I'm losing a little bit of my pigment. So it's gradual, all right? I'm blending in the wet paint of the chalk paint with my latex paint, and as I move upwards, I'm losing a little bit of that darker pigment so that transition is not very obvious, you know? We don't want there to be 3 distinct lines, light, medium, and dark. Okay? Make sure we can get pan down. Now I have kind of another in-between color. I have the color of the chalk paint and the latex paint mixed together, and now I'm going to go just a little darker, all right? So there's going to be less of that middle gray mixed in, and it's going to be more of the dark gray. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you see how simple it is to get this look. You know, refinishing furniture should be fun. You should be able to use the stuff you already have in your house. You should enjoy the process. So now I'm getting down to the end. I am going to go ahead and pull out my black, okay? This is just kind of a straight up dark color. I gotta mix it up a little bit. The oils are all laying at the top. So this is, I wouldn't say it's flat black, but it's close. So now I'm gonna bring this really dark color into the very bottom, and I'm gonna blend it upwards. Again, if it gets a little thick, just give it a dust of water. Now, the only time I would say be careful with the water is if you know that your piece is a veneer and it's not real wood, then you have to be careful with the water, because if you use too much, you get buckling. So when I say use water, I would only suggest to use water generously on a piece that you know is solid wood. All right. So we're taking that really dark black, and as you can see at the very bottom over the brown, it's actually not that dark. Okay. So we're going to blend it up. And now, as you can see, oh, so I don't know if it's clearly evident, but I am not tapping in the ornate details. I'm not trying to get all the black in every group because I want the brown to pop out, okay? So the more dimension you have from those different tones, the more beautiful your piece is gonna look. It's gonna have more character, okay? All right, so I'm tapping it a little, but not too much, because I still want some of the browns peeking out in there. So, and we're gonna bring it up. You can see I'm just kind of making sure my strokes stay really long. So now, there should not be a very distinct line from top to bottom. I'm not going to necessarily rinse this out. I'm really bad about rinsing. I'm a lazy painter. I'm going to go ahead and tap it out on my cloth because we're blending everything anyway. So we don't really need to rinse if we're going to blend the colors. All right. So now, my beautiful friend, Anissa from Nissanut, she's my furniture refinishing idol. She gave me these DIY paints, all right? She just wanted to kind of help me get started on some of my own projects. So I have been able to do a lot with one little can. Now, if you don't have this particular kind of chalk paint, you don't need it. You can still use a light colored latex paint and just water it down, all right? I'm using it because I have it. I'm a big fan of just using what I already have in the house. So kind of that reduce, reuse, recycle business. All right, so we're gonna pop in some of those lighter tones up here and then draw them down. Now I'm running a little short on this color. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it all the way across and make sure I have enough to go around before I start the weathered barnyard look on the top. I'm gonna pull it all the way over. Now, my brush is getting dry, so you can spray a little bit on your brush and it kind of just blends a little bit easier. I'm gonna take that white and I'm gonna start pulling it down. Okay, we're coming in here. You see that's a really pretty, like, kind of a cream color. I enjoyed working with it on my last project. To think about when you're doing a piece like this, don't try to get everything too matchy-matchy. You don't want everything to be perfectly matching. You want it to look like it was naturally old, right? And things that are naturally old, they're kind of sporadic. So as you're doing your pieces, you can allow yourself to go a little heavier in some areas and a little lighter in others, and provided you're blending it down, it usually works out really well. All right, so we're starting where we were before with getting the medium gray in. So I'm putting my light gray chalk paint from the hardware store. No name brand mentioned. And we're going to go ahead and start in that middle area and bring it down again. I really do hope that everyone watching my, oh, there's paint splattering everywhere. That's fun. Everyone that watches this, I would just be thrilled to bits if you guys come back on and show me what you did. It makes me so happy to see, you know, people that have been inspired and that have decided to tackle their own projects, and they realize how easy it is. It's really, really not complicated, and it's not expensive. It does not have to cost a lot of money. So as you're going through, keep an eye out. Make sure there's no globs. Make sure that you're spreading it out. You want it to look very gradual. So I'm gonna pull those colors down. And now as we get into this area, we're gonna start pulling that medium gray up. We're not quite there yet, but we will in a second. There's this cute little tassel in my brush that keeps dipping into the dark gray. Okay. Now you're gonna have to excuse the color. I did try to do it in a time where there was natural lighting in the room, but the sun keeps coming in and then going, so I know the color is adjusting as the sun gets kind of more finicky in this afternoon light. All right, now see what I did there? I pulled a little bit of this lighter all the way over, and it's showing a little bit of those grooves, you know, some of the lines. I'm going to be doing a lot of that as we finish this piece. I'm going to do a little more spraying, make sure everything's blending well. All right. Now, I'm noticing in here there's some weird brush strokes, okay? I don't like it. I don't want to see brush strokes, so I'm kind of tapering those out. And it's easy when you're working with any type of watered down or chalk paint. It's easy to kind of buff out those strokes. Okay, I am tapping in up here at the top a little bit to get the paint into some of those grooves, because this is supposedly the lighter portion of my project. So I don't want too much dark up at the top. We're trying to get that ombre look. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving too much dark up there, okay? So now we're getting back into our medium gray area. Now again, I'm dipping into good old latex paint, so make sure that you are somewhat generous with the water and allowing it to blend. The idea for me is that with this tutorial, if you've purchased this tutorial, you should be able to make up the price of this one class with one single product that you didn't have to buy, that you already had sitting around, you know? That's my hope. And if not, you go to a hardware store and you see what kinds of items they have in their oopsie paint section, okay? So now, let me clarify what I'm doing. I'm taking some of that gray and I'm mixing it upwards into the still wet chalk paint. I kind of want it to fade as it goes up. Our dresser, when we're done, is going to have so much dimension, you're just going to get lost in it, all right? We're going to pull that out. Now we're going to start pulling it downwards. And now, if you're watching this video, you're going to have a tool. It's going to be very useful for yourself with all future refinishing. You're going to know that you have what it takes to transform a project, make it something new, but you're going to be able to do it without spending a boatload of money. And if you're into that side of the business and you're doing it for business, you'll be able to make money for your family, for your business. If it's for yourself, it'll be a fun little project and it'll be something you can enjoy for a long time. So again, I'm still working on that medium gray. I'm going to take a little bit and pop it back over on this side. Now I'm getting kind of down closer to the bottom where we had our black, but I don't want to start with the black yet. I'm still blending the dark gray down a little bit farther. Spray bottle, it's getting sticky, all right? I'm not quite ready for that really dark color yet. You know, I tossed around the idea of allowing the bottom to be dark brown and then blending upwards. I've seen some really beautiful pieces. Anissa has done a piece that looked like that. It's dark brown on the bottom and it blends up into like a cream and a gray. It was stunning. But you know, this wood, I'm not a big fan. It has these weird specks of, I don't know if they're stain or what it was. So we're just gonna go ahead and cover that up because I don't have time for that nonsense. Little specks of stain, I just, ugh. All right, so now we're taking our black and we're gonna blend that in to our gray. Make sure to check your work. Make sure there's no drips. You don't want drips in there. They're not cute. And as you can see, nothing I've done has included sanding yet. I don't sand. It needs to be reasonably clean, dusted off. But this girl doesn't have any patience for sanding. Because the truth is, I want my piece to look weathered and I want it to look old. So I'm going to intentionally put distressing and little tiny gouges and things like that in it. So I'm definitely not going to be trying to make it look perfect. That's not the look I'm going for. I want it to look old. So I took a little more black and I'm blending it into the bottom. Pulling it over. Now, don't worry about making it super perfect the first time around, the first go. We don't want it to be perfect because we're going to come back in and we're going to be mixing and blending. So, as you can see, I haven't cleaned my brush off. And what's still in my brush? It's the black. But there's very little left on it. So I'm just coming back up through the top and I'm just adding a little more dimension to those lighter areas. So there's very little pigment left on my brush, but I'm gonna go ahead and go up in here and just mix in a little bit of the darker color. It's gonna catch on the details and it's gonna highlight those little areas where there is a lot of detail. I'm just brushing it across. That's why I like this brush. You can go back and forth and catch those raised curves. Now, if you're working with a piece that has fewer, I would say, raised areas, you're probably going to go ahead and come in a little bit lighter. But for this purpose of doing a piece with all these raised areas, which I know a lot of you said you have similar furniture that you want to redo, you can just whip it kind of back and forth on there, and you're going to catch a lot of those pieces. And it's just going to cast the slightest bit of dark on top of that detail. It's going to make it pop. So as you go through, check your work. Make sure there's no crazy little, like, you know, globs or, you know, areas that are awkward. You want it to be pretty blended. And come back down through. Now, we're gonna get to the portion where we're gonna distress a little bit. So I'm going to use, right now, a paper towel. And also for those areas that have dried a little bit more, I'm gonna use a baby wipe, all right? So the baby wipe is good for areas that have dried a little too much. It takes the paint right back off, and you're able to kind of pop in a few of those details that you lost. All right, so I'm just gonna draw it in. Let me see. All right, so I want to pop in just a couple little areas where it looks like the paint has worn off. Now this is just completely to your taste. You know, I'm using the dry one to give it a little bit more of a gradual distressing. You can see little peaks of that brown still in there. And there are areas that I want on my piece to still show that wood, all right? You're gonna come in, and this is the time to do it. You don't get to come back and distress later. You're gonna have to use sandpaper, which I despise. So if you like to be lazy like me, come in when it's still wet and use your paper towel and your baby wipe and get those details back. Just kind of pull it in and rough it out. Don't get too concerned right now with, have I done enough? Have I done too much? We have lots of opportunities to come back and tweak things. But if you want a heavily distressed look, you're gonna really spend some time on this section. If you want a lightly distressed look, just pull in a couple different little areas, okay? So, most of my hardware is gonna have the patina effect happening on it with the browns and the turquoise. So I'm not too concerned with the hardware. I want to make sure that it's not too globby paint-wise. I want to make sure that I don't have little areas that... Now, you can see the paint's still coming off really easily there. I'm going to see if I can bring it in a little bit closer. Okay, because when you're doing detail work, it's fun to see up close. All right, so look for those edges that you want to show that wear and tear. And you can go ahead and put that in. So over here, there's quite a bit of dried stuff. I'm having to press down a little bit more to get the paint back off. Up here, it's also a little bit dried. A couple areas where there's quite a bit taken off, and if you take a little too much off, you can always tap in color again later if you want to. I'll show you what it looks like to put color back in if you've taken it off and you're not happy with it. Simple. You take your brush and you just tap, and now you see how that kind of disappears. It kind of gets softened up. So You get to adjust how weathered you want this to look. Okay, I still have a little bit of gray left over in my brush. You get to decide how this is going to be. All right, I'm going to pull down there. Now, I want to use my baby wipe. There's a couple areas that don't look very gradual with their blending. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that up. I'm not pressing down very hard with the baby wipe. I want it to be soft. Okay, I want that area to be very soft with the blending. And I'm blending on the inside of the door because I don't want there to be a distinct line where my paint finish happens and then the inside of the cabinet happens, because I will not be painting the inside of the cabinet. All right, so I'm going to kind of soften up that line and draw it down. All right, we're going to come back in here, pull in a couple little details. This is the time. This is the time for you to do this. Don't come back to it after it's dry. I'm doing most of my distressing with the baby wipe. They're very, very, very handy. And just know that the baby wipe, it pulls color off pretty easily. So be delicate at first and you can give it a couple more passes if the paint isn't coming off fast enough. Now, as you can see, my leftover Hillbilly acrylic paint that I'm using is also coming off, not just the chalk paint. I'll go ahead and pan down. Now, this is where it gets more acrylic. You do have to press down a little bit, but it still comes off. See, you can see those little peaks of brown underneath. And then I'm coming in here. And now here, I want to kick it up a notch. I think it's pretty, yeah, you can see it from here. I'm just checking. I really want some of those details to come back out. So, and I want it to be dark. So I'm being a little bit more generous with my removal of color over in this area. I'm using my paper towel now. Paper towel is a little bit rough for taking that paint off, but it works well on the latex paint. I'm trying to see if you can, yeah, there we go. Now, if you're watching this and doing it yourself, at this point, you've only spent 30 minutes on this project. You know, let's just factor in a couple pauses, maybe 40, 45. But see how easy it is. I took a little bit off of the knob there. You can see a little bit of the bronze sticking out. I'm okay with that. I want my dresser to have a lot of different colors. All right, so now with my distressing, I'm pressing down on those raised lines to get my color back, okay? It's also giving me the chance to see where possibly some of my color has pooled in some of the grooves and made an awkward, kind of an awkward pool of paint. All right, now we're getting into the area that's kind of dried down here. So now I'm taking out my wet wipe again to pull some of that paint up. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and address some of the fun stuff at the very bottom with that black. I'm trying to get a good angle here where you can see what's going on. Hopefully the lighting cooperates. Okay. So now this is pretty wet still. We did this kind of last, if you remember right. press down. Press down with that paper towel. It's wet, so I'm able to go all the way across and pull out a lot of that brown. If you want it still to be primarily gray, you can take it light on this final pass. Now I have a big piece here that's showing some of the original brown, and I absolutely love it. I don't mind a peak of that, like, you know, speckled wood, that brown wood. I think it adds a lot to the piece to have a little peak. I have one coming over here, so I'm going to bring a little bit of that wood in down here to kind of balance it out. I don't mind a little peak. I just can't take a whole piece with that all over the place. All right, so as you're coming into that darker color, you want to take it off. Just press down. Pull out those lines again. And that area over there is pretty stubborn, so I'll come back in with a baby wipe and distress out some of that. So now, that's all I want to take off for now with the baby wipe. I'm going to go ahead and come back on with a video that goes over how to get that barnwood type look. Okay? It's lots of blending. It's really fun. You use a lot of colors. So I'm going to do that next. Alright guys, now I've switched my furniture around because I want to show how to get a kind of a weathered wood appearance on the horizontal or vertical flat surfaces of your project, which is what I did in the one that I had posted online. I think we need a little more light in here. We'll figure it out. So I'm going to go ahead and start popping in the darker colors at the bottom, and I'm going to start blending them upwards. And then in the final section of our project, I'm going to show how we're going to come in and create a weathered patina with those turquoises, the coppers, the browns. But for now, we need to get our base coat on. So it's going to be very similar to what we did on the front of the project. We're going to start in with our darks down here below. Remember to keep your spray bottle handy if it gets a little bit hard to spread. I'm going to start with our gray. Now, I love to show that the dark colors are kind of bleeding in a certain direction, okay? So I like to show like it's just that wear and tear is pulling up on the project. So, you know, there's always usually a lot happening with these surfaces. But we're going to start with our really dark colors first and come back in. See, so we're just pulling them up. We want those strokes to be long. All right. So now everything's still wet. We're going to come in with our medium gray. So it's this one here. That was our black. This is our medium gray. And now I'm going to start pulling that color in. Now, when you're working with blending and with layers, make sure you work with them while they're still wet. You don't want to come back in later after it's dry because it looks forced, okay? Do it when it's wet, especially if you're working with latex. I know that chalk is a little more forgiving if you've gone ahead and invested in getting chalk paint or you've made your own. It is a little bit more forgiving. But for this purpose of trying to utilize blending and latex paint, you really need to work with it while it's wet. All right, now we're coming in with our light gray. This is going to be my favorite part because you're going to get all kinds of fun dimension while we're pulling in that lighter gray. I'm keeping my strokes long. Now this technique will absolutely apply to all of the other kind of flat surfaces that you're trying to get that weathered look on. So when you're doing your top, this is all the same technique. There's nothing different about it. Let me kind of pan upwards there. Trying to see if I can get away that there's less of a glare. I want daylight. I don't want too much daylight. All right, so we're using that medium gray all the way to the top. And then once we have that kind of covered, you can draw those colors down. I don't want it to be uniform. I'm not fixing that big old glob of white because I want it there, okay? I want that variation. So I'm just blending it down though, so it's a little less in one area. Now I'm going to take the white, let's see here, I'm going to take kind of that cream color that my friend gave me, and I'm going to tap it in way at the top. I'm going to pull it down a little bit. Now this part you can really just, you had a heck of a lot of fun with this part. It's kind of fun to see what direction you want to take in regards to the intensity of your colors. Okay, so now we kind of have that base coat mixed in. Now at the top, we want to make sure there's no lines that show like a distinct area, so we're going to feather it downwards. We don't want horizontal lines pulling across. So just feather those down. Now, if it's a little lighter than you want, that's okay, because we're going to go back later and do kind of a antiquing glaze that will kind of spill in from this area and pull down. So it's okay if it's a little bit lighter than you want right now. Okay, pull that down. I have a little light left on my brush and I'm pulling it all the way down. Gives just more dimension down to the bottom, okay? And then we'll pull up. Now, at this juncture, I'm gonna have a little fun with color, all right? As it dries, I don't want it to dry just with these grays. This is my chance to pop in a little extra tone. Here's what I have in my house. Here's what you can look for in your house to see if you have something similar that you can use. I have kind of a brown. It just kind of reminds me of like washed out peanut butter. So I'm gonna tap it in there. I'm gonna have my spray bottle handy, and I'm gonna kind of pop in little areas that's like kind of just brownish, you know, just here or there. Barnwood has all kinds of different colors mixed in. So don't freak out if it's a little bit darker than you anticipated, and don't over mix, all right? You don't want to lose the intensity by mixing too much. All right, so now that I've got that in there, I also have it's kind of a robin's egg blue, but a little bit lighter. It's kind of washed out. I'm just showing you what I have around. Your barnwood doesn't have to have these colors. It can be whatever you have around the house, so long as you're pulling in a couple different things just to show visual interest, okay? So I'm gonna pop in a little bit of that washed out robin's egg. And then pull it down. this is also my chance while it's still wet to go ahead and distress a little bit. So I'm gonna go back to having my paper towel and my baby wipe, and I want to kind of rough it up a little. I don't want it to be perfect. Okay, you can see there's little areas where my water sprayed. I'm blending that out. So I'm taking a baby wipe. I'm going like that, and then I'm blending it up. I'm showing a little bit of wood peeking out here and there. So I'm popping in that. It's kind of an area where the paint is a little bit lighter, because I don't want it to be solid, right? So I'm pulling out some of the paint and then I'm blending it down. It's actually really fun using my paper towel now. When you're doing this, make sure that you're pulling down kind of in a straight line though, because you don't want your distress to be wiggly. Weather and everything, they kind of tend to pull things down. So as you can see, pulling out a little of that extra paint. All right, nice big, here we go, area where it's kind of faded out, and I want to do more up here. I'm pressing down a little harder because it's starting to dry, and that's okay. So now, I want to get some of my weathering down here. I'm going to pull up, show a little bit of that original brown. This can be completely done according to taste. You don't even have to do it at all. If you don't want too much rustic distressing, take it real easy on this stage of the project. I have a lot of paint layered on there. So I'm just pulling it down. Now, again, you get that all, and you feather it out. My brush doesn't really have much paint on it, just whatever's left over. And quite a bit to begin with, because you see how much I've already pulled off, and there's still a lot left. Okay, a couple areas I'm not gonna fan out too much. I really want to show that wood peeking out. So now down at the bottom, there's these little details here. I'm gonna scrape across on these raised edges of the trim. And especially here in the corner, in my imagination, I figure that this area is very weathered because it was close to the ground, maybe water spilled in or whatever. So I want to see some of that wood peeking up. And I want to feather it out. All right. I love having these corners accentuated. Really makes them pop. And just allow a little bit of that original color to peek out. I'm going to kind of pull it in here on the center area. Okay, so if you can see, I have, let me see if I can change the angle here so it will be a little bit better for determining where these things are. So I have several areas that just have a lot of color pulled up. And for me, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Still thick in some areas. So I'm just taking my dry paper towel and pulling it downwards. I think personally, this is what makes these pieces so darn cool, is that they're so individual, you know? There's not going to be another one like it in the entire world. All right, so we've just used that dry paper towel to kind of pull off different portions. And check your areas, make sure that they're not, you know, there's nothing on there that is globby or, you know, too flashy. I'm going to go ahead and use my small brush, and I'm going to pop in that very, very, very light blue. It's just super, super light, super robin's egg. And I'm just going to put in a couple of those little areas. I want it to be sporadic. Okay? Now after I put that in, I'm going to blend it out with a baby wipe. Okay? Just blend it down. We're coming back into the top. Be patient with me. I'm working with a little space here, so I have to keep panning. All right. All right, I'm not going to touch it. I like that. It's different. It's not globby, yet it's kind of distinct. I'm going to put in a couple more up here and pull them down. I'm going to let it be, even though it's a little bit bright. We're going to be coming back in here with our little acrylic custom glaze mix. So it's okay if it's a little darker than we want for the absolute end of the project. I'm going to put a little bit more in here. Now, this is with our robin's egg blue. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and mix in a little bit of that brown again. And again, I'm using my small paintbrush, because I really just want to pop it in just here and there. All right, I want it to be kind of choppy and random. It's this brown kind of, like I said, it kind of looks like old peanut butter, you know. So I'm going to go ahead and draw it down, blend it out. Kind of want it to look like it's like tears just pulling down, it's crying. I think we need something up here. Use your wet baby wipe. Massage it out. Okay. Gonna put it a little bit more at the top. So now you're starting to see different dimensions in your barnwood. This is our faux barnwood, because we can't get our hands on the real thing. Wouldn't that be fun? But it is pretty. So it's got all kinds of history written into it. All right. So now I have a little bit of color left on my, on my baby wipe. I'm just going through and just seeing where I want to blend just a little bit more. Again, this is not the final pass, so don't freak out, but you just don't want really large, globby areas. You're going to go ahead and kind of come in and smooth everything out. I wouldn't get too, don't get too intense with this stage though. You've done a lot of work that you don't want to erase just because you've gotten too excited with the baby wipe. Okay, all right, I'm coming in with my paper towel that's still kind of dry, and I'm going to kind of just buff out that. All right, cool. All right, now as you can see, the light's cooperating with me. We're starting to get that barnwood type look. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and take a pause. I'm gonna get my piece turned around, and I'm gonna show you how to start to get the little hints of patina in the paint. All right, you're gonna have to forgive any possible shaking. I'm trying to hold it because my tripod isn't useful enough to be up this high. But now I've done the same kind of paint treatment that I did on the side, and I did it on the top. So now I'm adding in just a little distressing. I want some of that original wood to peek through in different areas. All right, now I've done the other side as well. But because it's similar, I didn't bother showing that. The more dimension that your piece has, the more interesting it's going to be as a finished product. You don't want it to be one-dimensional, two-dimensional. You want a lot of things happening with it. So I'm just using my baby wipe to pull off some of the paint. Okay, you see? There's a little off there, some off there. Now this, it's a pretty clean line, so I'm gonna come back in. And you see how I just used my baby wipe to soften that up? You don't even need your brush. I didn't want that to be quite so clean. Okay, here I want something coming off here. It's starting to dry, so I'm really having to press it to pull out that wood. Okay, and now I need a little bit coming off here. So I just wanted to kind of go over, I know we did it on the other side, but I want this video to really give you a good idea about how to come back in later and add those wet distressing details. So this blue that I've put on is a little thick. So as I'm using the baby wipe to pull up some of that paint, it's lightening it up. Okay, so now you can see the top has a much more weathered appearance. Now here, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to actually pull some of the remaining paint away. I do want a couple areas that are just a little bit darker. Okay, go ahead and pan to this side. We haven't gotten a chance to look at this side yet. I'm going to try to get better light going on. A little tough because it's kind of that time of night where the sun is doing funny things. It's changing up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause for the next portion. Okay, so now we have finished putting the barnyard appearance on the sides of our pieces and on the top. So now the front of your piece may look a little dull and chalky. All right, we're going to help that. So what I'm taking now is a Minwax, it's a polyacrylic by Minwax, all right? And we're just gonna brush that over some of those areas that look a little dull and lifeless. And then we've already done kind of some of the distressing that we wanna do. So we're kind of sealing that area in. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to go ahead and put a little bit of a protective finish on those areas and give our piece some of that shine, all right? So this polyacrylic helps to seal that in, especially in the areas where we had chalk paint. We will not be using a wax for this piece. Usually, typically, when you do a chalk paint, you use a wax. But again, this is little bit of a different process because we've utilized existing acrylic latex combinations. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of seal those areas lightly. All right. You can see some of that luster coming back to your wood with the poly acrylic. So now this is kind of the time where you can just pay attention to see if there's any big drips, if you've gotten into the corners where you want to get. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is not your final pass. Just a very, very light coat. Okay, and this is clear. There's nothing really going on with this section of it except for a very slight sheen. Maybe a little, very, very slight darkening of the existing chalk paint. We're just kind of protecting those areas that we've already distressed and painted, because at this point we've already taken off what we want to take off, and we kind of want to protect it now. So don't do this part of the refinishing until you've already taken off all the areas that you want to be brown. Okay, where you've already either done wet or dry distressing. This comes when you're finished with that step. Do not do this before then, because then it'll be a lot harder to take off. All right, so I'm not going to be too repetitive or unnecessary with the video. You get the idea. I just wanted to give you a gist of how to apply it. And it's very low-key process, this step of it. So I'll go ahead and do the other parts on my own, and then we get to come back in for the final pass where we put in the patinas, like the coppers and the turquoise, and we get to wash that into those little grooves and really give it that aged appearance. Hey friends, so it is day 2 of our dresser renovation facelift. So yesterday we tackled the base coat. We went ahead and put in our ombre, and we worked on the sides of our pieces, giving it that weathered barnyard look. Now we've gone ahead and done our distressing. We've sealed it with a polyacrylic lightly. We didn't spend a lot of time on that. It was a very light top coat because we don't want to pull away too much more of the paint when we come back in, and we distress it with our glaze and we add in our little patina accents. So again, I'm going to be showing you some hacks, some shortcuts, all right? We don't need to use a fresh coat of paint from a brand new can to get these little tiny pops of color. I'm going to show you what I'm working with today. I have the chalk paint I was using yesterday. I have the same dark gray paint and light gray paint. I have a tan. So these are all of the paints that I used yesterday. But what we're going to be using is a water-based wood stain. So I'm going to be honest, this was already in my garage. It was there from the previous owners. It's just been sitting there. So this kind of has almost a reddish undertone. What I wanted was to get like tiny little patina accents in my finish that kind of remind you of a copper penny. So just little tiny areas of glaze. So I'm going to use this, and what I'm going to be doing is mixing in, because I have very little left, I'm going to be mixing in a little bit of my clear wood stain, also water base, and as I go, I'm going to start tweaking that stain. So the first round, it's going to be kind of that chestnut color. I'm going to put in those accents over my whole piece, and then I'm going to go ahead and tweak it and make it a little darker, because eventually I'm going to want this stain to give it an aged look, almost kind of a moodier appearance, pulling in from the edges, pulling from the top and from the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and start mixing it up. This to me is really fun because I love mixing things. I just have a little bowl that I'm mixing it in, so I'm going to pour it in. It looks like a dark brown. All right, so for my first pass, I'm not going to mix any paint in yet. I'm going to be using just this wood stain, okay? And there's some stuck in the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of the clear one that I have just to get the rest of that pigment out of there, because I want to use up whatever I have first. So I'm just going to pour just a little bit in, mix it around so we have a lot to work with. A little bit goes a long way, so I'm going to kind of let that mix. I'm pouring it into my bowl. So what I have right now is just a really dark brown copper kind of stain, all right? And you'll see as I'm putting it on, you'll see that it just gives a very light glaze. And as I go over, there's going to be areas where it goes on too thick. So I use either a paper towel, or I also have an old sock. So clean, thank you. And I'm just going to go ahead and take off the areas where I feel like a little bit too much stain soaked in. So let's get started. Too much tacky, not enough plain. So I'm going to go ahead and touch on some of these areas that I want that glaze to enhance some of the dimensions. I'm going to kind of not be too particular about how it's put on. I just want to hit some of those highlighted areas. Again, this is that first pass. We're going to be coming over again with a stain that's mixed with a little bit of that dark gray paint. And that's when we're going to get some of those darker looks. But for now, I just want to get a little bit of that brown mixed in there. So let me see if that's, yeah, I want to make sure you guys can see well. All right. Make sure, now this is going to be kind of drippy. So you go back through as you're tapping it in. Make sure you catch all those drips. We don't want any of those drips to sit. Okay, now already, I'm looking from here to here, there's a dramatic difference in the appearance of like the curves and the dimension. It's exactly what I wanted. Don't worry too much about how dark it is. I don't want to take a lot off. I'm just going to do a kind of a light, just a light brush with the sock, because I don't want any globby areas. So just going to make sure there's no drips. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. Let me see if I can adjust it a little bit so the other side will be more visible. So we want that little copper penny look in there. And actually I think I want some more up in this area where the handle is. I'm going to kind of be a little generous with it because I kind of want that area to look dirty, you know, very weathered. I'm going to be kind of generous around the hardware. Now, as I said yesterday, I prefer this water-based products. I live in a very humid area, so it really helps with drying time. And also, I work in the house because it's super hot where I am. And so I can't be in the garage for hours at a time. It's torture. I don't like that smell in the house of oil-based products. All right, so as you can see, it's just really easy to spread on, get in those grooves. Be generous with the first pass because you can always wipe some of it out right away. Get it in there. We want all kinds of dimension. Okay. I'm going to go back through, and even on this side there's a couple little areas that are just, I don't want there to be any distinct lines. I'm going back through and making sure there's no drips or lines. What's fun about redoing furniture pieces is you can just keep tweaking them until they're what you envisioned. I mean, sky's the limit. If you like more browns, you can really go heavy on these next couple steps. Or you could adjust the initial paint color you use as well. If you'd like to tend toward the cooler, that's possible too. What you would do is maybe instead of this chestnut stain, you would choose something more in the, I would say in the espresso range, and water it down. But this brown looks really, really good with those turquoise patina accents. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing down below. I really want to hit all of those horizontal lines and get a little bit to sit in there on that, kind of like on a shelf. So what we're going to do later is come back through with the same color, but it's going to be a little bit darker. It's going to show up a little bit better down here. So now let's get some of these vertical lines. Make sure we spread the love. We're going back up again. All right, so we're gonna hit this top portion. And I really wanna get it into those grooves. Okay. Now, while I have this color, because I'm running a little bit low, I don't wanna have to remix this color later. While I have it, I'm going to move the camera around and show you how I'm hitting the other sides before I move to the darker color. Now this dries very, very fast, so make sure you catch your drips. All right, I'm going to move the camera. I'm trying not to shake it too much. Okay, so here's our side. We're gonna do the same thing. Just pop in a couple little areas of that kind of copper penny. Don't want it everywhere. Just a couple little spots. You don't want it to be too uniform. It's gonna mess with the whole appearance. Now, because we used that polyacrylic yesterday, most of the paint that we've already done on here should kind of stay put, okay? So now, I'm gonna move up to the top. Not sure if I'm gonna be able to pan up there or not, but I'm gonna try. All right, so bear with me because I am holding and going, but I'm just gonna pop in a couple little areas here just to get a little bit more warm tone. Okay. All right. That's kind of, and I won't be able to show you the other side because it's kind of tucked up against the wall. But I'll do that really quick before I mix my next color. Just gonna edge it out. Just get in a couple little areas over here. You can be a little chunkier if you want to, or you can be more gradual. All right. Now, we're gonna go back over, make sure there's no drips. Little areas where there's a tiny droplet that's drying in a weird place. All right. Now, Before I move on to the next round of stain, there's a little tiny bristle of a brush that got stuck on there. We don't want that there. We gotta get it off. All right. So next is one of my favorite parts. Because I am a watercolor painter, I think I just love mixing colors. It's just too much fun for me. So here's what we're working with. Just regular old acrylic bottles from your hobby store. This one happens to be Craft Smart. I have 3 of them. So those 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, as you probably all know. You can mix just about anything you want. So I'm pouring those out on my plate. We'll pan down. There we go. I'll show you the mixing magic. So 2 colors I'm looking for. I want one that's kind of a rust, and then I want one that is that turquoise color. So for the turquoise, like I said, you can use any paint. I utilize my leftover house paint. This is in like kind of a robin's egg blue that we used yesterday. So I'm going to use quite a bit of that. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the regular blue. Just a little yellow. Now, it's not quite as dark as I would like. So I'm going to go ahead and get out my gray. I'm going to be using that in a minute anyway. So I love my gray paint. It's so much fun. So it's this paint from yesterday. We're just going to put a little bit of that in there too on the plate. So mix away, get some of that dark gray, and I want it to be even brighter, so I'm going to pull in a little yellow and blue. Just keep playing with it, you know. There's really no, limit as to how much time you want to spend on this, or if you want to do it quickly, you can just get one ready to go. But for me, I just really want that turquoise to be perfect. So I play around with it a little ways. As you can see, it's getting closer to that bright color that I want. All right, so now that I kind of have that going, got that cooking, I'm gonna pop it in different areas where I just want to see a little bit of that blue. I'm just brushing it in, and I'm not really too worried about exactly everywhere it's hitting because I'm gonna be wiping it off again anyway. I'm just gonna brush it in a couple little areas. Get some up here. All right, so now you see we have it kind of peeking out here and there. And get some down in here. A little bit down in here. Like a little bit coming across. All right, so before I get too much further, I'm going to go ahead and buff those areas out. We don't want to just leave them sitting like that. We do want them sneaking into some of the corners and getting stuck there, but we don't want such an obvious visible line, okay? So we're going to come back in and kind of buff it out a little. Just using my sock. My main purpose is just to have a little bit of that blue peeking out. So most of this is coming back off. Okay, don't have to be too delicate with it. It's sturdy stuff. Just want it to catch in some of those corners. Okay. There we go. blue areas, we're just kind of cleaning it up a little bit, wiping off the excess. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit closer, and we can really pan in. There we go. Okay. Make sure you get to this fast because it is all water-based stuff. It dries fast. So you also kind of have to work fast. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and scoot you back again. There we go. Now I want a couple little areas that show a rusty look. So we're going to move into that. And for that, I'm using a little red, a little black, and some yellow. And just keep playing with it. Probably have to pull in some more red. But pretty soon, you'll start to get that coppery, rusty look. Just a little more yellow. You want it to be almost like a brownish orange. And I'm going to use this color pretty much over the whole thing. Now, every now and then when I feel like my paints are going to get dried out, I just use my spray bottle and kind of mist it. That way I'm able to kind of make it last longer as I'm mixing it up. So I'm almost there. I'm getting that red rusty look. All right, so now I'm just going to pop it in different areas where I want all of my aging to be, okay? Okay. Just be kind of sporadic with it, you know? Shouldn't be too even. Just here and there. Same thing that we did before with the blue. Come back in, kind of wipe it out. You don't want it just sitting there. So the colors that I'm using are all pretty much, they're pretty mute. They're not really loud colors. And I want this piece to be a little more subtle, but I still want it to have the depth that the other one has. So it is a little more toned down, but I'm also keeping in mind the room that it's going to be in. There's already kind of a lot going on with it. So just mixing up a little more of that rust. We're going to do this side. And just kind of figure out where it's falling, you know, is it coming in here? Is it in these little grooves up here? And now some of that brown is in there from the stain, and that's also helping us with the rust. We're just kind of figuring out where some of those other tones are. Okay. Now, you have the option of using these two colors on the other sides and the top. Now, I will go ahead and show you how it looks on the side. Then you can kind of see just how it might add a little bit more to that weathered barnyard look that we have on the top and on the bottom. All right, so we've got our kind of orange. So I'm just going to put in, just keep the lines in mind, the lines that you had going on the top and the bottom. Again, we're just getting more dimension going. The more things we have happening on this area, the more interesting your barnwood looks. Okay, same story. Once you have some of those colors up there, just lightly buff it out. Okay, we don't want to press so hard that we lose that color, but we don't want it to also be too obvious. So we'll just kind of pan down a little, just buff it out. Okay, we're going to do the same story with the blue. And you can see I don't really pay that much attention to whether my brush is perfectly rinsed out. I don't really care. It's all mixed up anyway. So let's get just a little bit of that turquoise color in there. Make sure you keep your brush and your plate wet. You don't want it to get drying out, then you'll lose your color. You'll have to start from scratch. So for here, I'm pulling a little bit. Let's see if I can get it so there's not as much glare. There we go. Yep. All right, so I'm getting it a little bit more green. My turquoise has a little more green on it. And I probably will pop a little bit over on the other side too. Okay. Figure out where that green is going to be popping out. All right, so now use your cloth and buff it out. It's really fun to make barnwood, if you ask me. It's very hard to make it go wrong as long as you kind of remember to keep it buffed. Don't make your lines too obvious. Make sure that you're moving on the up and down. You don't want to move side to side. You want it to simulate a wood grain. So you want to move up and down. So now you see how our barnwood is really starting to show some age. All right, so it's going to be the same story on the top. The exact same thing that I'm doing here, I'm going to also do on the top. All right, so I'm not going to show that portion because that's a little repetitive. I'm going to go ahead and finish out those sides, and then I'm going to come back on and show you how we're going to age with kind of a weathering glaze. All right, I decided that I needed a little more turquoise. I was going to skip on to the glaze portion, but I don't feel like there's enough turquoise in the grooves. So I'm going to kind of get us a little bit closer, because I really want to show you how I push those accents in there. I thought we could just do with a little bit more of this pretty little patina. So the blue that I had mixed before, and this is just an example of how you've got to decide how it looks as you go. I felt like it was too blue and not enough green. So I'm coming in here and I'm just popping more in. It's as simple as that. I want it to kind of stick in some of these areas where I won't be able to get it out when I start my buffing. Okay. Now, come back in here, soften up those edges. I really hope that you friends watching this have a heck of a good time doing this project, because I get such a kick out of it. And I get a kick out of the fact that I was able to use so many of the things that I already had to achieve this look. So now there are a couple areas here where it's dried slightly. So I'm just buffing it out with my sock, all right? And down here, I'm pressing down a little bit harder because I want a little bit of that paint to scrape off. I want to see a little bit of the wood. It's pretty easy in this stage when the paint hasn't been setting for very long. It's pretty easy to go ahead and press down a little bit and get some of that paint up if you want to expose a little bit of it. All right, so now I'm going to buff this area out over here. I'm going to go ahead and pan over. See, I'm getting all kinds of values in there, and we haven't even done the weathering dark glaze yet. That's really, really, really fun. I'm excited to show you that part. Let's go ahead and bring our accents down into this portion. We haven't really focused very much on this yet. I'm still trying to see if I can get it so that there's less of a glare. There we go. I'm still using the paints I was using before. My turquoise and my rust. I'm gonna have to mix a little more rust up. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm pulling some across this portion. I want to show off some of those horizontal lines. I want it kind of stacked up in some of these corners. A little bit down at the bottom, a little bit here, maybe a little on this side. Don't be too orderly with, you know, where these things are going. I'm putting a little here on the handles so it kind of gets caught in the grooves. I just think that's kind of a cool look. Accentuate the details in that hardware. All right, now work fast, okay? Because as you know now, this dries pretty quickly. So once you brush those on, go ahead and get to buffing it out. You're working with a piece that does not have as many grooves. You're gonna have to be a little gentle about your buffing so that you don't lose all your colors. For me, I can really buff away and I don't lose all of my color because it's already kind of gotten caught in there. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna go across down here and then at the bottom. Man, it really dries fast, so you gotta move. Down in there and across. All right. All right, so now we've got a lot of our turquoise accents popped in. Down here and buff this out. I'm gonna pop in a little bit more rust. Not much. I have some exposed wood down here already. So I don't really want a whole lot of extra brown tones. Just a couple little areas will be more than enough. So I'm mixing up kind of an orange again. A little heavier in the yellow. And I'm mixing a little gray to make it darker. I'm gonna just pop in a little bit up here at the top. Maybe a little bit down here. I don't want a lot. I already have a lot of brown stuff going on down here. So let's go ahead and buff that out. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and mix our glaze. So here's how our glaze is going to work. We're going to be mixing a bit of our wood stain with a clear tint, and I'm going to mix it in with a dark colored paint, and I'm choosing to use my black because I want this coat to really stand out and to really make it a little bit more aged on the edges. And now this is not going to be a wash that covers the whole thing, but I'm going to be wanting to catch it in some of these grooves up at top. I want some of it to kind of age the area around the hardware. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that up and then come back on in a minute. Okay friends, and next we're going to spend a little bit of time working on our barnwood, and we're going to weather it a little bit more. So I have down here my leftover brown stain. Okay, it's the stuff that we used on the front that looks kind of rusty. I have the stain that I mixed using my clear stain, and I mixed it with a little bit of black paint. So I'll show you what that looks like, and I'm using my brushes. So what I want to do is start weathering the wood a little and having some of that dark stain fall down over my piece. All right, so I want this area to appear to be pretty dark. I'm going to go ahead and paint that in, work a little bit on my edge up here, and I really want that dark stain to just kind of spill down. So now maybe not completely uniform across, definitely over here on the edge. And again, I'm using my clear stain that I bought. And the reason I bought that was because I can mix it to any intensity that I want. I can mix it with any color that I want. So I mixed it with that black paint. So I'm going to go ahead and take my sock and I'm blending that in and down. See, it's up here. I want it to look a little muddy, like it sat out for a long time, stuff is splashed on it. Now, I'm taking a little bit of my brownish stain that we used on the front, that copper color, and I'm popping in some of those to highlight this as well. I'm choosing to kind of do it over that existing exposed wood that I've distressed out. And we'll pan down. I'll show you how I'm coming down here and popping some in. This is an important step. You can't just swipe, your paint on and then a couple little highlights. This is a really important step to get more of an authentic weathered look. You gotta phase those stains in. And because this is water-based, it is so easy to spread. All right, so now I really want dark coming in up at the back of my dresser and kind of bleeding upwards. So I'm gonna focus on doing that next. Just gonna start down here. I use my little poor watercolor brush that's been used and abused. And I'm pulling that stain up. Kind of looks like it got wet a few times and dried and who knows what. Keep your brush strokes long, okay? You don't want there to be globs or patches. All right, so you can kind of see how that's taking some form. And figure out where else you want those little weathered patches to go. I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go along, where I want that dark to go. And some of my paint may be a little damp still. Not all of it's dried completely. But that's okay because it all kind of blends together. Okay. Now I've kind of done most of what I want to do over here. I'm just going to use my sock and I'm going to blend it together. You go over and you realize you took off too much, just patch it in again. I want a little bit more up here at the top, bleeding downwards. Okay. Now, I'm not pressing down very much because I want to leave most of that color up there. So I'm trying really hard to blend it down without losing the intensity of it. And if you're, nope, I'm sorry, need to pan back up. All right. So, catching it in, blending down. You're gonna have to forgive me. I get so into my project, and this is typical of my videos, but sometimes lose track of the technical aspect of it. So I'm really punching in a little bit of those dark low lights in the shadows. All right. I want to leave that alone. I like that. I'm going to put in a little bit more over here. And you can layer this stain. It's very forgiving. You don't have to, you know, go in once and then leave it alone. All right. I'm liking that. I'm going to go ahead and go to this area here where it meets in the front. There's a little piece of molding that sticks out. This is the front. I want to distress in this area over here. Bring it out to the middle. Want the edges to be, yeah, can you see? Yep. Want the edges to be kind of dark and moody. All right. This is kind of wrapping around on my front. I'm using this opportunity while I have this angle to go ahead and hit some of those spots that maybe not got neglected on the front. I'm going to brush that in there and then buff it out. All right. I'm going to go ahead and switch angles so you get a good view again. Okay, so we're back to our front. We're going to do the same process that we did on the side, where we're going to start tucking those little details, especially with the dark stain that we haven't used up front yet. It's had a chance to kind of dry. We have our turquoise in there. We have, I'm going to go ahead and just shift it just a little bit so it catches the maximum amount of light. Okay, and I turned off my overhead because I felt that it, you know, the light was really detracting. It seems more orange than it actually is. So we're just going with daylight here. All right, get that straight. Perfect. All right, so this is just the funnest part of the entire project, I guarantee you. This is where you really just get to have fun personalizing your baby, okay? So now, I feel down at the bottom, I really want there to be a couple areas that are almost black, okay? I want it to be very, very, very dark. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm going to use my brush, which is still dirty from all the other things I've done, which is totally fine. I'm going to tap it out, and I'm going to pop in some really, really dark black. And I kind of put some on the edge of my paintbrush there. And I'm not going to try to overdo. I do want some of these areas to be just a little bit darker. Sometimes we forget about the bottom. All right. Get some of that black in there, and then we'll buff it out. Using the smaller brush to get into some of these grooves. And then I use my bigger brush to fan it out. And I'm just going to be doing this with different things. Right now this is my paint, just my latex paint that I had. All of these are interchangeable. Latex paint, chalk paint, stain, as long as they're all water-based. All right, I'm going to even tuck some of this really dark color back into the corners of the details, okay? All right, now I'm switching over to a stain. I'm going to start with my reddish stain, that one that I've used already a few times. I want a little bit more rust. I'm going to pan up. I want a little bit more rust tucked into some of these little areas in here. It's not quite red enough for me. This just goes to show you, you have many chances to tweak your piece. Got a little horsehair in there or something. Many opportunities to figure out, did I put enough of this in, and to go back and add a little bit more. So I'm gonna pop in some more of those. Now before it dries, go back in and buff it out. I love what's happening over here in these corners. I'm gonna bring it in momentarily to give a little bit more of a close-up. You see how it's just really starting to stick, you know? It's starting to look really rusty, which I love. You can still see that blue peeking out there too. Okay, I'll go down. I'm going to do the same thing down here. A few more of those little copper highlights. I'm almost running out. I'm going to pan over that way. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Buff it out. running out of my reddish tint. How sad. Which is fine because I've kind of pretty much got it wherever I wanted it anyway. But that kind of chestnut type stain really came in handy to help me get that look I wanted. Before you go and buy supplies, go raid your garage, your workshop, see what you have. Recycling's not just about, you know, putting your plastics in the recycling bin. It's using what we have. All right, so now I'm gonna back it up just a little bit again. Give me a little more room to work. All right, now we're coming back in with our dark stain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it into some of these grooves up here. I think we need to go up a little bit. There we go. Pushing it into some of these grooves and corners. And then use my brush to buff it out. I can use my brush. I can use my sock. Either works. Does what you want it to do. You just want to kind of spread that around a little bit. I want to concentrate some of my dark color here in the corners. I'm going to pull it up, pull it over, and then buff it out. Start to get that really gorgeous dimension. I'll tuck a little bit in there too. This brush is very handy. Can't tell you how handy it is and how cheap it was too. I won't tell you what brand because it's irrelevant. It cost $12 on Amazon, so. It's called the chalk paint brush. Look for the one with good reviews that says that it has minimal shedding. All right, so now in this area, I really want to take up a notch some of the wear and tear around the handles. I really want it to look very worn around the hardware. So I'm really being pretty generous about what I tuck into this area here. I want it to be darker in the center and then fade outward. So I'm just going to come in lightly and blend it. Okay. I kind of leave that alone. I love it. I think it's exactly what I wanted. So when it looks good, stop. Just accentuate your beautiful lines. You know what's fun? And I encourage you guys to do this. Take a video of yourself working on your piece. And you know why? It's really fun to go in and rewatch your video and you can kind of like fast forward through it and you can see it start to develop and take shape. And it's just really encouraging to see what you can accomplish, what you can do. It's amazing what you're capable of creating. It's fascinating. I amuse myself because sometimes I'll do that with my watercolor paintings. I'll go and I'll fast forward and it's fun. It's like, it's kind of like watching a cool movie. It's just like it evolves. So So now our grays are getting some of those varied tones. It's not all one gray anymore. Let's kind of pan up a little. Using my brush to tuck in some of that dark stain and then buffing it out. Gonna get some over here, and I'm gonna draw it down. I want to kind of look like it's spilling downwards, spilling out of the corners, over and over. I'm going to continue this line up here. I want to accentuate the shadows underneath. Okay, pan up, bear with me as my logical brain catches up with my creative here. All right. Now we're showing some of those lines. I'm going to tuck here in that top line. I'm using my small brush to press the color in and then buffing it across. Can't see from this angle, but the top of my doors are kind of bare, so I'm pushing in a lot of color right up at the top. Fade it over and down. Now we're going to focus a little bit more on this door. So we've gotten most of what we want over on this side. If you wanted to come back in and kind of dry up any areas you can. But I'm liking it, so I'm not going to really tweak it too much. Maybe a little more down there. Start over on this side. Get this a little more weathered. As you can see, there's a little left on my brush, so I don't have to work with a whole lot. Just press some of that gray stain in there. Blend it around. Let's get some up here. Some of these grooves. Now, you can watch, you can just kind of make it. You don't really get into the grooves, but you brush it along the top. Okay, it works like this. It leaves a lot of the color in there. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing down below. We're going to get some of that dark stain in there. And some deep in these little grooves. And I'm just going to buff it across. See? A lot of the stain got caught in there, and I just love it. That's the whole point of this process, is to get it caught in those grooves and accentuate the beautiful lines. And do the same thing over here. We're going to deepen up this rust as we go over it. And just buff it out. Pay really close attention. This is your chance to kind of see if there's any like odd bare spots in there. Okay, so now I think we're getting there on this side. Get some little lights tucked in at the corner. Slip across. And you can see now how our piece is getting a really beautiful sheen from that stain that we're pressing into the details. It's starting to really get a glossier look to it than when it did when it just had the paint. So, looks worn, but it also looks pretty and classy. I love tucking it into the corner and then pulling out. All right, so take a minute. Look at it. See, where are my bare spots? Are there any drips? There's a couple areas in there. Gotta tap out. Now's the chance to catch those. Now, we're gonna kind of change the angle just a little. Want it to look more straight on. Let me see here. Get a little more in here. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry for now. I think I buffed out most of the spots I want to buff out. Actually, I'm gonna get just a little more dark over here on this side. Yeah, I like that. A little bit more up here, pulling down. Here we go. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and start on the bottom. There's a couple little areas that are a little lighter than I want. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna use my plate. I'm gonna pour some of my stain out on there so I can dip in just a little bit easier. So I'll show you guys. I'm gonna pour it out on this side. That way when I'm tapping my brush into it, I can kind of control and tap out. So I'll show you what I'm doing here. Kind of tapping it out like that. So I'm gonna use more of my brush in this area with the long strokes. See if it helps to get a little more light in here. It helps the video a little bit. My light changes in my room, so occasionally I have to adjust it just a little. And I'm gonna bring this tripod down just a tad so we're closer. There we go. It can be a little finicky, but we'll make it work. Okay. So again, we're just tapping on our plate, and we're just going to get in some of those darker colors. Over this area, just roll your brush really slightly. You don't want to cover up all of that blue that we worked so hard to sneak in there. So again, go lightly over this area. You want to catch just the top of it. Okay. Gonna get just a little bit of black paint. Gonna put it right up there in the top, nice and thick. You want dimension, you want certain parts to be quite a lot darker. Just makes it more interesting. I'm not going to buff that out too much. And just draw it down. And this part, guys, as you're brushing your stain on, if you want your piece to edge on the lighter, just take it easy on this. I will show you if you want it to not be overwhelming. Now this is my ombre, so this area down here is dark anyway. For my purposes, I do want it to be pretty dark, so I'm not brushing off a lot, but you can always use your sock and just tap it out a little if you want to. Any of you have had interest in painting on wood, as far as painting designs on wood, if you want to visit my page Color in the Water on Facebook, I have a free live on there of a painting I did on a headboard. It's a painting of a peafowl. I can tell you now, it was such a fun project. And you can just check that one out for free anytime. It'll be available for replay on there. All right, so I think that's all I want to do with the dark. As you can see, we've tapped in most of our highlights, lowlights. I'm going to go ahead and move it back so we get a little bit of a better view of the entire piece. There we go. All right. I'm going to shift it just a little. There. Get a little bit more out of that glare. So I'm pretty much getting very close to being finished. Now your pieces should be dry relatively quickly. I would say completely dry probably in 12 hours or so. It should be pretty much ready to go. And if you feel like you're done and you're not sure, you can always just put those materials away and then go and check on it the next day and just tweak tweak it, you know? I'm gonna go ahead and take this off, and let's see here, can we flip it around? I don't think so. So I'm gonna kind of come up close. You can see some of the detail we've been working on. So we've got a lot of dimension in there. All right, here's where we are on top. I'm gonna go ahead and flip the lights off, get a little bit better appreciation of the color without that orange light. All right, so thank you guys for joining me. I had so much fun doing this tutorial with you. I'm hoping that if you have any questions, here, let me see if I can get it where the glare is not. If you have any questions at all, just contact me by Messenger on Facebook. Again, my name is Color in the Water. So shoot me a message. If there's something that you saw in the video that didn't make sense, if you felt like maybe I didn't explain something, please just let me know, and I'm happy just to help you through any hurdles that you might have. So I actually really enjoy meeting different artists and getting to know people. That's half of the fun of my job. So again, if you have any questions, contact me and have fun painting.